911, where's the location of your emergency?
An unexpected tragedy that nobody saw coming. A loving grandmother's home burned to the ground. And when firefighters arrived, they thought they had a run-of-the-mill house fire on their hands. But as they soon discovered, what happened that day was not a tragic accident at all. It was something far more sinister. Did you believe that your mom's death was an accident at first, too?
Yes. They said something about a coffee pot. I'm like, I don't know, but we just thought it was an accident. And then we learned about no smoke in her lungs.
The whole thing was an elaborate cover-up orchestrated by a seasoned criminal. The fire was intentionally set, and the grandmother's death, a carefully calculated murder. I'm Kelly Kennedy, and you're listening to Dark Side of the Land.
She deserved a lot more. It's not fair. You know, my mom must tell me 100 times, life's not fair. And boy, yeah, she had her life stolen.
It's been nearly 16 years since Sue Mazzoni lost her mother and her best friend.
I can't even imagine what she went through, and I wish to God that I knew more at the time. I would have had her stay at my house. I would have, like, something, anything. You know, you always think you could have done more, you should have done something else, and you can't go back, unfortunately.
At 67 years old, Gwendolyn Bewley's passion for life had only grown stronger. You could often find the grandmother out on the golf course or taking care of her garden.
There's things I appreciate about her that I took for granted before, and I'm sorry that it's easy to take your parents for granted, but you shouldn't, because you don't know how long they'll be here.
Mazzoni says her mom was spontaneous and loved to travel. She swam with dolphins, even went parasailing.
She was just enjoying retirement and just going out with her friends all the time and watching, our kids, and, she just kept very active, and I give her a lot of credit. I roller skated once around a rink with my kids and husband, and it wore me out. I'm like, how does my mother do this?
Bewley lived alone in a 2-story house in Fairview Park, a quiet suburb that borders Cleveland's west side. But her life was tragically cut short on August 29th, 2007, when that house suddenly went up in flames. So let's go back to the day when you first heard the tragic news. Do you remember where you were and what was kind of going through your head at the time?
We were all in bed, and it was about, somewhere around 9:30. My sister and her husband came to my house, my older sister, and she knew my garage door code. She couldn't get a hold of me, so here she comes in my bedroom door, and at first I couldn't understand what she was saying, and I'm like, what? I thought something happened to her dogs or something, and like I said, I just woke up, and I get in the kitchen, and she's telling me, and I was in shock. I told her husband, I said, we need to go to my mom's house. We need to go to mom's house. I want to know what's going on. And it was just very shocking.
What did police think happened at first? What did they tell you?
We at first thought that, at least from my understanding, they said it was like a coffee pot or something with the stove. There was a lot of papers in her kitchen and just a lot of stuff because she had cleaned out my grandmother's house. My Aunt Carol was the last one there. And when my aunt died, they brought everything into my mom's house. So everything was all over the place. And I think at first we just thought it was a horrible accident.
Like an electrical fire or something?
Something like that, yeah.
At what point did you start to get suspicious?
There was no soot in my mother's lungs, and I confirmed that with the police.
And that was exactly what tipped police off and turned the death of this suburban grandmother into a murder mystery. Investigators noted no evidence of smoke inhalation and called the cause of the fire, quote, suspicious. At first, Mazzoni didn't have any reason to suspect her mom's next-door neighbor, Timothy Shalene.
The most I knew is that he was doing yard work. And he was supposedly trying to teach her how to use the computer. And she had no patience. And while he was fooling around in there, I guess he ingratiated himself to get some accounts to steal my mother's money.
Once Mazzoni learned that her mother was already dead when the fire started, she began digging into some of the people in her mother's life. She got on the computer and looked up her mom's so-called helpful neighbor. And what she found next made her skin crawl.
I was playing detective myself, as anyone would. And when I saw his report, I'm just like, he killed my mother. There was no doubt in my mind with that kind of history.
Mazzoni dug up Shalene's criminal record, and as we confirmed, his crimes go all the way back to 1974. Shalene was arrested for possession of a bomb in '74 and convicted of stealing pounds of dynamite from a plant in Michigan and then trying to sell it in Toledo. His criminal record continues with multiple convictions of grand theft auto in Florida, Colorado, and Ohio, assaulting a police officer in Toledo and another officer in Denver, plus fraud, forgery, and assault convictions. But the worst part, she learned Shalene had committed an eerily similar crime in 1989. He was convicted of aggravated arson in Lucas County, Ohio, after he set his ex-girlfriend's house on fire and killed the family's dog.
On purpose. He knew that dog was in there, and he was retaliating against the boy that turned to his mother saying that he caught him robbing his piggy bank. And he that's what he does, he retaliates.
When you saw just all these things and when you started to realize who this guy was, were you scared?
Oh yeah, I was terrified, and I still am today.
Now, Mazzoni didn't meet Shalene until her mother's funeral, which was after she learned the shocking truth. But she had to play it cool, so she wouldn't tip him off about the police investigation. What was your first impression of him?
Just creepy. I guess he tried to fit in and look normal. I did see a picture of him in my mom's pictures where he's trying to dress nice. I guess he had gone up to the skating rink and probably just seeing who my mom's friends were and just spying on her like that.
After that, she learned Shalene had been conning her mom, pretending to be a financial advisor and stealing money from her accounts. Can you talk to me about how you started to put those pieces together?
Well, I don't know if I have intuition or what, but I called one of my mom's credit cards just off a whim. It was a Discover. And I think that's the one that he ripped off to make a special account. I forget what you call it, like a 360 or something like that. I'm not sure, but he siphoned money out, I believe, of that account.
Then she discovered Shalene had been stealing checks from her mom's account too, and even forging her signature.
I was in my mom's house with my ex-husband, and we're going through stuff, and something told me to where I was at. Don't ask me. Maybe my mom was communicating with me from heaven. I decided to look under the rubble, and I found my mom's checkbook. And we're like, that's not our mother's signature. You know, my sisters and I all agreed and we could tell that he forged like a $2,000 check for house doings. So I have no idea how much he ripped my mother off.
After putting all the pieces together, Mazzoni came up with a theory. Why do you think he killed your mom? Do you think she was catching on to him?
Because I believe she caught on to him, especially after reporting that money missing, and he couldn't get that to go in his account.
She thinks her mother's next-door neighbor pegged her as an easy target. When he looked at the happy-go-lucky retiree and grandmother, all he saw was dollar signs.
It's not fair. We had a lot of stuff stolen, and my mom, just, you can't get that back. I can't have her back, but I just want to warn people to be more careful. Watch out for your parents. They're living alone out there, and you don't know who their neighbors are.
Not only did this man murder your mom, but the way in which he did it was so brutal. And then setting the house on fire to try to cover it up, it was so calculated.
He put things on top of her body, and after they say that he strangled her. and lit her body on fire, which caught the house on fire, and trying to destroy evidence. He really thought he could get away with this.
Do you feel like Shalene should have still been locked up at the time that he murdered your mom? Do you feel like the courts kind of dropped the ball?
Oh yeah, if they'd have noticed his history, he didn't even serve his full term when he attacked the police officer. And here he was let out on probation and became a fugitive once again.
Investigators suspected Shalene had murdered his neighbor, but they just didn't have enough evidence to prove it. In 2008, Shalene was arrested when police caught him driving Bewley's car. They also found several of Bewley's credit cards with him. A judge released him on bond, but when it was time for his sentencing, Shalene never showed. What do you think about the fact that Shalene was even let out on bond in the first place? Do you feel like the courts kind of didn't do their due diligence?
I don't know all what they can see. Maybe they can see what I could see, probably more. I don't know. I can't say. I don't know what the judge could see at the time. Mm-hmm. But I certainly think they should have seen something in there to say, you know what, this man's a dangerous criminal. He needs to stay in jail until the trial.
Cleveland defense attorney Tara Coleman believes Shalene's prior criminal record probably went unnoticed.
My understanding is some of the crimes he committed over that 34-year record are out of state. I'm not necessarily sure if the judge had his full criminal record before him. That is a problem that here in the US, we do not necessarily have a coordinated criminal record system across every state police department.
In the end, a judge sentenced Shalene to 3.5 years for the car and credit cards. New technology in 2014 finally gave investigators the evidence they needed to put Shalene at the scene of the crime. Sue, how did you feel when he was finally arrested for your mother's murder after all those years?
Oh my God, I was thrilled because his probation was coming up in March, and this was December 31st, and I was elated that finally, this man is not going to be able to run, and his probation was ending. God knows what he would have done then. I was just so thrilled. I can't even tell you. It was about time. This took 10 years to put him away.
But the next few years were not easy. Shalene pled not guilty after his arrest, but the case dragged on for years until he finally went to trial.
I just wanted him put away, dead. I didn't care. I just wanted him put away for good. I didn't care if it was 6 feet under. I just threw daggers at him the whole time, and it was very hard. This is the man that murdered my mother and sits there and smirks about it, could care less. He has no guilt, nothing. He has no remorse whatsoever. It's sickening. I just wanted to kill him myself.
Mazzoni says the trial itself was a nightmare. And it wasn't until 2017 that Shalene was finally found guilty.
He turned it into a 3-ring circus. The judge reclused herself. One of the lawyers left. He fired 2 other lawyers, or 3. I couldn't even keep track anymore. He just, like I said, he turned it into a 3-ring circus. It was ridiculous. And they didn't want him to be able to appeal anything. So he tried appealing, saying that he didn't get a speedy trial. I'm like, really? The main prosecutor, she's like, this is ridiculous. He's saying that he didn't get a speedy trial, and he's the one that delayed everything. 19
News was in the courtroom the day of Shalene's sentencing. Shalene sat there in cuffs and an orange jumpsuit, his gray hair slicked back into a ponytail. His expression, blank. His stare remained stone cold, even as Mazzoni shared this heartbreaking testimony moments before his sentencing.
I can't possibly comprehend a person with no soul and no remorse. I can only thank all of you for giving my mom justice. Thank you. Thank you. I can't have my mom back. And you're still here. You have your family. I work for the airlines. I took my mother to France. This is her charge scarf. It's about the only piece of clothing I have left from her. I have pictures, thank God, I copied when I was little. That I have some kind of family pictures. Because not much survived in her house. And what you did to my mother is horrible. How dare you? You have no remorse. You sit there and you smirk and wink at your family. I don't know who could support you. You can't even say you're sorry because you never will be. You are a sick man and you should have been put away a long time ago.
Was it difficult facing him in court?
If I could have jumped on him and strangled him myself, if I could get away with that, believe me, I would. I mean, I hate what he did to my mother.
A decade after Bewley's murder, Shalene was sentenced to 20 years to life. He's currently serving his time at Marion Correctional Institute. Shalene's first chance at parole is in 2034. Do you feel like justice was served in your mom's case?
I would have liked to seen him in a more hardcore prison. I mean, yes, they did find him guilty, and I am thrilled that he's away for pretty much life. I don't picture him living to be 86 years old. I'm beyond elated that he's put away, but I would like it to be a little bit harder on him because I was reading about Marion Correctional where he is, and they're doing yoga, they're doing all kinds of nice, fluffy things, and he doesn't deserve that. I would put him in Alcatraz if I could.
And ever since her mother's murder, Mazzoni has been sharing her story, pushing for tougher penalties for violent repeat offenders like Timothy Shalene.
I think they should do like a 3-strike law. And obviously, if people can't be rehabilitated, they're not going to be. There are certain people that I believe low-level offenders shouldn't be in jail. Maybe some kind of treatment program, but people that commit these heinous murders, most of them are sociopaths and they have no business being out in society. They're not going to be rehabilitated. And this in and out of prison is not working. They're not being rehabilitated.
And sadly, Bewley isn't the only one who's had a loved one taken from her by a violent criminal with a long rap sheet. In 2017, Reagan Tokes was only a few months shy of graduating from Ohio State University. The 21-year-old psychology major had her whole life ahead of her. On February 8th, 2017, Tokes had spent the night working at a local bar in Columbus. Her co-workers called police to report her missing, but the very next morning, police made a gruesome discovery in the park. The young woman was found naked and had been shot twice in the head. At first, police had no idea what happened to the college student. All of her personal belongings were missing. Eventually, investigators dusted her car for fingerprints and tested DNA on several cigarette butts. Finally, they got a lead. The DNA matched a 29-year-old convict fresh out of the joint, Brian Goldsby.
That would have saved Reagan's life if we had somebody actually monitoring where this killer was.
The registered sex offender had just wrapped up a 6-year sentence for kidnapping and raping a pregnant woman, and he didn't waste any time going after his next victim. Authorities say he kidnapped, raped, and murdered Tokes. Goldsby is now serving multiple life sentences. Reagan's tragic death did lead to a new law, and lawmakers say it could have saved her life. But hopefully, it will now save others.
If we are seeing people who are doing repeated crimes, we should be able to take that back to our prosecutors and say, we need to give them more crimes. We have to take it even a step further about making sure that we are monitoring with our GPS.
Reagan's law changes how violent offenders are sentenced to prison. Judges can sentence felons to a range of years instead of a set term. A second part of the law just passed this year. It deals with life after prison for convicted felons. The law increases GPS monitoring, allowing law enforcement to access offenders' locations in real time in the case of a crime. It also reduces caseload burdens on parole officers. It's something Sue Mazzoni wishes had been in place before her mother was brutally murdered by repeat offender Timothy Shaleen.
Well, if they're not being rehabilitated and they're just revolving in and out of prison, they're not getting any kind of rehabilitation. A lot of sociopaths will never rehabilitate. Tim is a perfect example. You can't let people out to be a danger to society that are like that, because this is what they end up doing. They end up killing.
To any other victims' families who might still be fighting for justice for their loved ones, what's your message to them?
Don't stop. Do everything you can. I've reached out to so many people working at the airlines. I saw a lot of politicians. I reached out to George Voinovich. I reached out to so many people that would come through. Anybody I knew that was a politician or whoever, I didn't care. I wanted my mom's story out there, and I wasn't going to stop. I talked to America's Most Wanted, or I sent everything into them. I did whatever I could. Do whatever you can. I was in the news, all over the Cleveland.com pages. I wasn't gonna stop until this man was put away for good.
I'm Kelly Kennedy, and this is Dark Side of the Land.
Subscribe now for future episodes and find more Dark Side of the Land and photo galleries related to these cases at cleveland19.com.